Some of the most meaningful changes in our lives don't begin with a decision. They begin with a question. A question that opens a door where certainty once built a wall. As Venus enters Gemini, the energy gently shifts toward curiosity, conversation, and connection. This isn't a transit about having all the right answers. It's about becoming willing to see yourself and the people around you with fresh eyes. In today's reflection, we'll explore why curiosity is one of the most overlooked forms of emotional intelligence, how it can transform the way you communicate, strengthen your relationships, and even reshape the conversations you have with yourself. I'll also share a simple practice you can use over the next few days to help you replace assumptions with understanding, creating deeper connection in ways that often surprise us. Sometimes the shortest distance between two hearts isn't certainty. It's a sincere question. Venus is often associated with love, but love is only one part of its story. In astrology, Venus also represents the way we relate to life itself. It reflects how we connect, what we value, what brings us joy, and how willing we are to remain open when life offers us something unfamiliar. As Venus enters Gemini, that openness begins expressing itself through curiosity. Not curiosity that searches for more information, curiosity that searches for greater understanding. It's a subtle but meaningful shift. Many of us move through life believing we already know the people around us. We know how they'll respond. We know what they'll say. We know what they think. After enough time together, our minds begin filling in the blanks before conversations have even begun. This isn't because we've stopped caring. It's because the brain naturally looks for patterns. Patterns help us make quick decisions and reduce uncertainty, but they can also quietly close the door to discovery. When we assume we already know someone, we stop asking questions. When we stop asking questions, connection slowly becomes routine instead of alive. The same thing can happen in the relationship we have with ourselves. We begin telling the same stories. I'm just an anxious person. I'm not creative. I'm always behind. I'm not good at expressing myself. These thoughts can become so familiar that we stop questioning whether they're still true. Venus in Gemini gently invites us to become curious again, not only about the people we love, about the person we're still becoming. What if you've changed more than you realize? What if someone close to you has been growing in ways you haven't yet noticed? What if the conversation you've been avoiding has the potential to bring greater understanding instead of greater conflict? Curiosity creates space where assumptions once lived, and space is where connection grows. When we become genuinely interested instead of immediately certain, something remarkable happens. We begin listening differently, not to prepare our next response, not to defend our point of view, simply to understand. That kind of listening is surprisingly rare, and because it's rare, it's deeply meaningful. People don't always remember the exact words we say. They remember how it felt to be heard. Perhaps that's one of the greatest gifts this transit offers, a reminder that meaningful relationships aren't built by always having the perfect answer. They're built by remaining open enough to keep discovering each other, again and again. The same curiosity that strengthens your relationships with others can also transform the relationship you have with yourself, because the moment you stop assuming you've already reached your limits, you create space for an entirely new version of yourself to emerge. One of the quickest ways to weaken a relationship isn't through conflict. It's through assumption. Assumptions often begin with good intentions. We think we know what someone means because we've known them for years. We assume we understand why they reacted a certain way. We believe we already know how the conversation will end before it has even begun. Our minds do this naturally. They're designed to conserve energy. If the brain can predict what's likely to happen, it doesn't have to work as hard processing every new experience. That ability is incredibly useful, but it comes with a hidden cost. The more certain we become about someone, the less curious we tend to be. And without curiosity, relationships slowly lose their sense of discovery. Think about the beginning of any meaningful friendship or relationship. You asked questions. You wanted to understand what inspired them, what they feared, what made them laugh. Every conversation revealed something new because your mind was open. Then, over time, familiarity replaced curiosity. Not because the person stopped growing, because your attention stopped looking for what had changed. The truth is, no one stays the same. The person sitting across from you today is carrying experiences they didn't have a year ago. New hopes, new worries, new dreams, new perspectives. The same is true for you. Yet it's surprisingly easy to continue relating to each other through old versions that no longer exist. Venus entering Gemini gently invites us to become students again. Students of the people we love. Students of ourselves. Instead of thinking, I already know. Try asking, what might I not be seeing yet? That single question creates room for understanding. Psychologists sometimes describe this as adopting a beginner's mind. It's the ability to meet familiar experiences without assuming you've already seen everything they have to offer. This mindset changes relationships in remarkable ways. You become less reactive because you're more interested in understanding than proving yourself right. You become more compassionate because curiosity naturally softens judgment. You become more adaptable because you're no longer holding people to versions of themselves they've already outgrown. The same principle applies inwardly. Imagine approaching yourself with that same curiosity. Instead of saying, this is just who I am, try asking, who am I becoming? That question keeps growth alive. It reminds you that your identity isn't fixed. It's unfolding. Every experience teaches you something. Every meaningful conversation shapes you a little more. Every season reveals another part of yourself that was waiting to be discovered. Perhaps that's the quiet wisdom of Venus in Gemini. The deepest connections don't come from believing we've figured everything out. They come from remaining curious enough to keep discovering what has been changing all along. Curiosity doesn't only transform the way we understand other people. It transforms the way we experience life. Think about how often we move through an ordinary day on autopilot. We wake up, follow familiar routines, have familiar conversations, notice familiar surroundings. Our minds become so efficient at recognizing patterns that we often stop noticing what's actually new. Yet life is constantly changing. Every day, people around you are learning something, growing through something, carrying thoughts and emotions you've never seen before. The same is true within you. There are parts of yourself that are still unfolding, interests you haven't explored, strengths you haven't tested, dreams that haven't fully formed because the right experience hasn't arrived yet. Venus entering Gemini reminds us that growth often begins the moment we become willing to explore instead of conclude. Many of us unknowingly limit ourselves with sentences that sound harmless. I'm just not that kind of person. I've always been this way. People like me don't usually do things like that. These statements feel certain. But certainty isn't always truth. Sometimes it's simply familiarity. Imagine if every chapter of your life had ended with the person you were at that moment. You would never have discovered the resilience that difficult seasons revealed. You would never have found the confidence that grew from experiences you once thought you couldn't handle. You would never have met the version of yourself that's listening to these words today. Growth has always asked one thing of you. Remain open. Open to learning. Open to changing your mind. Open to discovering that your potential is often much larger than your current self-image. This openness naturally changes your relationships as well. When people feel that they're free to grow around you, they feel safer being themselves. They're less afraid of making mistakes, less afraid of changing their opinions, less afraid of being honest. Curiosity creates that kind of space. It replaces judgment with understanding. It replaces assumptions with discovery. It replaces the need to always be right with the desire to genuinely connect. Perhaps that's one of the most generous gifts we can offer another person. Not immediate advice, not quick conclusions, simply the feeling that they're safe enough to be fully seen. As Venus moves through Gemini over the coming weeks, notice where life is inviting you to become more curious. Read something outside your usual interests. Start a conversation with someone whose perspective differs from your own. Ask another question instead of rushing toward an answer. And every so often, ask yourself one of the most powerful questions of all. What if there's more to discover here than I first imagined? That question has the ability to keep your mind open, your heart flexible, and your relationships growing for years to come. One of the greatest misunderstandings about communication is that it's primarily about speaking. In reality, meaningful communication begins long before words are exchanged. It begins with the quality of our attention. Think about the conversations that have made the biggest difference in your life. Chances are, they weren't memorable because someone had all the right answers. They were memorable because someone made you feel understood. They listened without rushing. They stayed present instead of waiting for their turn to speak. They asked thoughtful questions instead of assuming they already knew your experience. That kind of presence has become increasingly rare. We're surrounded by constant information. Messages arrive instantly. Opinions compete for our attention every day. It's easy to begin listening only long enough to form our own response. Venus in Gemini offers a different approach. It reminds us that curiosity is an expression of care. When you ask someone a thoughtful question, you're communicating something much deeper than interest. You're saying, "Your inner world matters." That simple message has the power to strengthen trust, deepen relationships, and create conversations that neither person will easily forget. The same principle applies to the relationship you have with yourself. How often do you become curious about your own emotions instead of judging them? When frustration appears, do you immediately criticize yourself? Or do you gently ask, "What is this feeling trying to show me?" When you feel exhausted, do you call yourself lazy? Or do you become curious about what your mind and body may need? Curiosity transforms self-judgment into self-understanding. And understanding creates space for lasting change. This doesn't mean agreeing with every thought or emotion. It means becoming willing to explore them before deciding what they mean. That single shift can completely change your relationship with yourself. Instead of living from automatic reactions, you begin responding with awareness. Instead of defending old beliefs, you become willing to outgrow them. Instead of trying to win every conversation, you begin creating conversations where everyone has the opportunity to grow. Perhaps that's what Venus in Gemini is truly celebrating. Not communication as performance, communication as connection. Every sincere question opens a door. Every thoughtful conversation expands your perspective. Every moment of genuine listening reminds another person that they matter. And every act of curiosity strengthens something equally important within you: the ability to remain open. Because an open mind continues learning. An open heart continues connecting. And a life built upon both never stops growing. Over the next few days, I'd like to invite you to try a simple practice. Not to become more interesting. Not to become more knowledgeable. Simply to become more curious. Call this exercise one curious question. Each day, choose one conversation and replace an assumption with a genuine question. It doesn't have to be a deep conversation. It could happen with your partner, a family member, a friend, a colleague, or even with yourself. The important part isn't who you ask. It's how you ask. Ask because you truly want to understand. Not because you're trying to lead the conversation toward a particular answer. You might ask someone, "What's been on your mind lately?" What has brought you the most joy this week? Is there something you've been wanting to talk about but haven't had the chance? Or perhaps you'll turn that curiosity inward. What do I genuinely need today? What has been giving me energy recently? What part of my life is quietly asking for more attention? Notice what happens when you stop rushing toward conclusions. People often reveal parts of themselves that assumptions could never uncover. The same is true within your own mind. Sometimes clarity doesn't arrive because you've found a better answer. It arrives because you've asked a better question. After the conversation, take a quiet moment to reflect. Ask yourself, what did I learn that I couldn't have discovered by assuming? Then ask, how did curiosity change the way I experienced this conversation? You may notice that the conversation felt lighter, more relaxed, more genuine. Perhaps the other person opened up in ways you didn't expect. Perhaps you learned something that challenged an old belief. Or perhaps you simply felt more connected because you were fully present instead of preparing your next response. These moments matter. Not because every conversation needs to be profound. Because every genuine conversation strengthens your ability to connect with life as it is, rather than as you imagine it to be. Over time, curiosity becomes more than a communication skill. It becomes a way of living. You become less interested in proving yourself right, more interested in understanding, less attached to certainty, more open to growth. And that's where lasting wisdom often begins. Not with having all the answers, but with remaining humble enough to keep asking thoughtful questions. Because every meaningful relationship, including the one you have with yourself, continues to deepen the moment curiosity becomes more important than assumption. As Venus continues its journey through Gemini, you may begin noticing something quietly changing. Not only in the way you speak, but in the way you experience the people around you. When curiosity becomes a habit, life feels less predictable. Not because the world suddenly changes, because your attention does. You begin noticing details that once slipped past unnoticed. The excitement in someone's voice when they speak about something they love. The quiet kindness behind a gesture that might have once seemed ordinary. The small moments of connection that have always been there, waiting for someone to slow down enough to appreciate them. The same shift happens within. You stop defining yourself by old stories. Instead of saying, "This is just who I am," you begin asking, "Is that still true?" That question creates freedom. Many of the beliefs we carry about ourselves were formed years ago. Some were shaped by childhood experiences, others by disappointment, some by moments when we simply didn't know ourselves very well. But people grow. Perspectives evolve. Healing changes the way we see the world. Why shouldn't it also change the way we see ourselves? Venus in Gemini reminds us that identity isn't something we discover once. It's something we continue exploring throughout our lives. The more curious you become, the more room you create for new possibilities. Perhaps you're more resilient than you once believed. Perhaps you're more compassionate, more creative, more capable of meaningful relationships. Perhaps you've already become someone your younger self would admire, yet you've been too busy looking ahead to notice. Curiosity helps us recognize those quiet transformations. It keeps us from becoming trapped inside outdated versions of ourselves. It reminds us that growth isn't only about learning new things. Sometimes it's about letting go of old conclusions. As this transit unfolds, allow yourself to meet each day with a little more openness. Not every conversation needs to change your life. Not every new idea needs to become a new direction. But every moment of genuine curiosity expands your understanding just a little further. And those small expansions begin shaping a very different life. One where relationships continue evolving. Where learning never truly ends. Where your own heart remains open to surprise. Perhaps that's one of the greatest forms of abundance. Not having life completely figured out, but waking up each day knowing there's still something beautiful left to discover. About the world, about the people you love, and about yourself. As we come to the end of today's reflection, I'd like to leave you with one simple reminder. You don't have to know everything to stay open. You don't have to have every answer to keep growing. Some of the most meaningful moments in life arrive because we were willing to stay curious just a little longer. A single conversation can change the direction of a relationship. A single question can change the direction of a career. A single moment of honest reflection can change the direction of an entire life. The opportunity was often there all along. Curiosity simply allowed you to recognize it. As Venus continues moving through Gemini, give yourself permission to become a lifelong student. Learn from the people around you. Learn from experiences that challenge your assumptions. Learn from your own emotions instead of rushing to judge them. Every experience has something to teach the person who's willing to listen. And perhaps that's what makes curiosity such a powerful form of wisdom. It keeps the heart open. It keeps the mind flexible. It reminds us that every person we meet is carrying a story we haven't fully heard, including ourselves. Over the next few days, continue practicing your one curious question exercise. Notice how different conversations feel when your goal isn't to be right. Notice how relationships soften when people feel genuinely understood. Notice how your own mind becomes calmer when you replace certainty with wonder. These aren't just communication skills. They're habits that shape the way you experience life. Because the quality of your relationships will often reflect the quality of your attention. And attention is one of the greatest gifts you can offer another human being. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this reflection helped you see yourself or someone else through a fresh perspective, I'd love for you to continue this journey with us here at Daily Inner Alignment. In our next reflection, we'll begin exploring the energy of July, where a new season of growth invites us to turn curiosity into purposeful action and continue building a life that reflects the person we've been becoming throughout this journey. Until then, stay open, stay present, keep asking thoughtful questions, and remember, every meaningful connection begins with the simple willingness to understand before being understood. Take care, and I'll see you in the next Daily Inner Alignment.